So Kai Asakura versus Alexandre Pantoja.
Yep.
We got a guy making his debut fighting for the undisputed belt, which is not all that often that happens in the UFC.
Right.
And we're going to see if the young Kai Asakura is as good as advertised and if he's able to hold up to the level and the standard of what is the benchmark in the industry, the UFC. You know, we've seen time and time again with, for example, like a Ben Askren,
Right.
where somebody's very, very dominant in a different organization, Ryzen, one championship, Bellator, even PFL, and they come into the UFC and they don't see the same success that they saw in other organizations. Now,
Right.
Kai Asakura, I believe, is a very deserving fighter to get a belt. And it's weird saying that because he's never fought in the UFC before.
True.
But he's fought some really good competition within the organizations that he's fought in before.
Right.
His last win was a knockout win against Juan Archuleta. Juan is a very good fighter.
Yeah.
You know, we knew Juan from back in the day when he used to train with TJ Dillashaw.
Great guy.
Really, really a high-level guy. And so to suffer a knockout loss to Kai Asakura kind of speaks volumes to where his level might be, but we
Right.
won't actually know. Now, Pantoja is good all around. He's got some pop for 125. He can take a shot. He does absorb 4 significant strikes per minute, but he throws about the same volume, so it's kind of 50-50 in that, as far as that's concerned. Now, his grappling is where he can really shine. He's got great takedowns, really creative on the mat, really nice back takes and things like that, and I think that's the area that he may be able to exploit on Kai Asakura. And then for Kai, I think he's going to need to use that distance. But I want to get your thoughts on the fight, and then we're both going to ultimately make our predictions.
Yeah, I love this fight, and it's really fun to see something like this experiment where you got a pro debut, a UFC debuter fighting for a title, and when the UFC
That would be really interesting if it was a pro debuter fighting for a title.
right, CM Punk thrown right in for a title shot. So it's really interesting because that tells you what the UFC thinks about this young guy, and the UFC they're always looked at as an organization that seems to stick their nose up to all other promotions because their level is so much higher. But they aren't blind to talent in other promotions. And if there's somebody that's really good out there, they will figure out how to get a hold of him. And look, Kai Asakura, he might not be a name here in America right now, but if you get thrust into a title shot, there's some serious stuff on that, especially when it's your debut. And for me, I've been watching some of his fights. I know a little bit about his fighting style, and he's got a style, especially at 125, that could be very exciting for the fans to watch. High intensity, very explosive striking, creative striking, incredible scramblings as far as the grappling and wrestling goes. I think he might actually have a wrestling advantage over Pantoja, a slight wrestling advantage, but the jiu-jitsu will definitely even that part out because Pantoja is very good once he starts to get the positions he likes on the ground. So this fight to me, it's going to be very interesting because we don't have as much to go off of from Kai Asakura's career fighting guys in the UFC. And we all know that there's a difference in level from the UFC and anybody else that's running an MMA promotion. So I'm really interested in seeing just how good he is. He could be better than we're expecting, or he could be worse than we're expecting. And most of the time when these guys come over, they don't live up to the expectations. Sometimes they do. Justin Gaethje's done quite well after coming over.
Yeah.
Ben Askren, not so much. So I'm really interested in seeing how this goes. But if I'm looking at it, I got to go with the guy who has been, he's now considered a vet, a grizzled monster, a champion in the UFC in Pantoja. He's just seen so many styles. He knows how to win fights against very differing styles. That means he's good at game planning. He's in sync with his coaches, and they understand, okay, we got a heavy striker. We know what we need to do. We need to stay at bay, keep our distance until we can find our openings. Get your striking going. Don't show Kai that you're afraid of his striking. I don't think Pantoja's afraid of anybody at flyweight striking. But he knows where his bread and butter is, and he knows that if he can get Kai to the ground, especially after the videos that have been surfacing these past couple weeks of Kai, sparring at the PI with like Merab Dvalishvili, and he's been sparring with a few other people, and it's play sparring, it's fun, it's not high intensity, but they're able to grab a hold of his legs very easily. Merab's almost doing it like for fun, like he's making a joke of it. He's like, I'll throw a couple strikes and I'll just grab your leg when I want and let it go. And so I'm worried that if Kai tries to get inside too much and strike and get his hands off, that Pantoja will be able to get inside, body lock, some sort of trip variation to get the fight to the ground. And that's why I'm interested in seeing if Kai's able to utilize every bit of this of the cage, if he's able to use his range and get off some of these electric strikes that he's known for. If that's the case, it could be an early night for him. But like I said, 125, it's hard to get single shot knockouts. Pantoja's a grizzled vet. He's very good everywhere. He's the champ for a reason. So yeah, I'm not going to spoil it too bad, but I do see Pantoja getting his hand raised.
Yeah, really solid points.
Thank you.
So getting into the X's and O's and where I think this gets really interesting, can Kai Asakura become a UFC champion in his first ever UFC fight?
Yeah.
I believe the answer to that question is yes, he can. Now, it's a tricky road to get there because of a couple of factors. Pantoja is really durable. If you think back to the Brandon Royval fight, that was a scrap.
Great fight.
Pantoja showed a real grittiness, a chin. Even though he got knocked down, he was able to recover fast. And what does Kai Asakura do really well? He cracks.
Yeah.
If you look at his knockout ratio, it's way higher than the average 125er. That's how he wins most of his fights, by knockout. So the likelihood of him winning this fight, if he is to get the fight won, is to do it by knockout. Well, Pantoja is a very difficult guy to knock out. You mentioned also that Kai may even have a slight wrestling advantage over Pantoja. That may be true, but Pantoja has some really good stand-up grappling, not necessarily your traditional doubles and singles, but some really good body locks, some leg entanglements, some trips and things like that he uses to get his opponents to the ground.
Right.
And then when it actually does hit the ground, I think Pantoja has a massive advantage there. So the road to success for Kai Asakura is going to be do some damage very early on in the fight, to create that hesitancy in the champion where he doesn't want to close the distance often and just continue to break down that range that Asakura is able to use. If Asakura is able to hit Pantoja with some really good, meaningful shots early and hurt him, one, it's going to slow his opponent down, and he's going to see the shots coming a little bit more readily than he would if Pantoja was super fresh.
Right.
But also, it's going to make Pantoja think twice if he's getting cracked every time he tries to go in for a body lock. So doing damage early is part number one. And then I don't think this fight's going to end without Kai Asakura having his back on the mat.
Yeah.
So eventually he's going to have to tango with Pantoja on the ground as far as jiu-jitsu is concerned, is to really stay safe and look for your escapes.
Yeah.
Don't try to do any damage from the bottom. Don't try to get creative and hunt for a submission from the bottom. That's not going to work against Pantoja. Keep yourself safe. Look for your escape.
Right.
Get up with expending as least amount of energy as possible, because this is a 5-round fight, and you're talking about a very, very durable fighter in Alexandre Pantoja. So I say all that, but then ultimately my prediction is going to be just in line with yours. I think that the level in the UFC is above that of any other organization in the world. I think that's been proven time and time again. As we said, Ben Askren, Justin Gaethje's a great example of somebody who came into the UFC and did well, but never really to the highest of heights. You got Michael Chandler, who everybody loves Michael Chandler, but he's got a losing record in the UFC.
Right.
There's guys that are really good. Even Yuri Prochazka came in. He had a big head of steam, but now he's kind of win one, lose one sort of fighter. I just think that Alexandre Pantoja is the best 125er on the planet right now, and I say that because Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson just retired not that long ago. And yes, while he was in another organization, he is a UFC guy through and through.
Right.
So, my thought around the fighters who are outside of the UFC not being as good as the fighters in the UFC, at least at the top of the heap, the exception to that is DJ. But I'll digress from that point, because I think Pantoja by submission in the third round. I think he's going to have a tough first 2 rounds. I do think he's going to have to dig into that durability that he's got a little bit, because I think he's going to absorb some big shots. But ultimately, I think towards the end of the second round, third round, he's going to start to find his entrances. He's going to get those body locks. He's going to bring Asakura to the ground, and that is where he's going to start to do his best work and ultimately get one of those signature back takes that he's so good at getting and slip in a rear naked choke for the finish.
There you go, all the way down to the finish. I like it. And yeah, I'm going with Pantoja to win this fight, but there's going to be a ton of talent on display in this fight. I'm really excited to see just how advanced these guys are going to fight. So in my opinion, Kai Asakura is going to come out and he's going to prove to the world and to the UFC that he belongs. So I think the first round is going to be electric. It's going to be exciting. There's going to be some wild scrambles that take place. They're going to show us a whole gamut of stuff. And I could even say that I think Kai might win this first round because he's an explosive guy. And we know that explosivity does start to fade later in fights, especially 5-round fights. But in the beginning of a fight, that's when they're most dangerous and they could really find their best shots with the most pop on them. So I'm really excited to see how this fight starts and how Pantoja deals with the adversity early on. As it continues, like I said, being an electric, explosive fighter does weigh on your gas tank. So I do look for Asakura to slow down a little bit as the fight goes on. And when that happens, Pantoja is going to continue to bring his momentum and his pace up and up. And he's going to take him right into those championship rounds where he likes to be. He's very familiar with them. And when you've got a guy making his debut in the UFC, they know there's a difference. Whether Kai has a handful of 5-round fights or not, it's always going to be a little bit different. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this fight plays out. But if I'm going to predict the way I see it going, very electric first round or two, likely going the way of Kai Asakura with some dominant striking, some cool grappling on display, but I don't think anything's going to catch too much for Pantoja. Then we're going to see a little bit tired, a little bit gassed Asakura come out, and we're going to see the turning of the tide. We're going to see Pantoja start to take over, have a little bit more success on the feet as he goes for these level changes and takedowns and some cage work to try to wear and grind out on Asakura. Once we see that, I think we see a little bit more vulnerable Asakura on the ground, somebody who's not as good as finding their escapes once Pantoja finds his dominant positions, and ultimately we see a submission finish. I'm going 4th round rear naked choke, Alexandre Pantoja. A great debut for Asakura. He's going to sit right there in the top 3 after this performance. I believe his star will continue to rise even if he loses his debut, but I'm going Pantoja.
Sounds good. Love the prediction.
Thank you.
Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Ian Garry.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody's O has got to go.
That's right.
This is why we love the UFC. They make matchups that we want to see. They don't push things down the road for years because we're building 2 guys and we don't want to ruin one of them yet. No.
We're going to hear that boxing?
Yes. Ooh, shots fired.
Yep.
But, you know, the reality is Shavkat Rakhmonov was supposed to fight for a title.
Right.
There was very few fighters in any division in the UFC that were more deserving of a title shot than Shavkat. You literally have an undefeated fighter that has never gone to a judge's decision. The guy's got 18 wins, 18 finishes.
Insane.
And they're about 50-50 based on his, submission to knockout ratio. So really as complete of a fighter as you could imagine.
Yep.
Ian Garry, say what you will about the guy and his persona on social media. He's a really good fighter.
Right.
And he's also undefeated. You don't get to be in the UFC fighting on a co-main event undefeated unless you're a really damn good fighter.
Yep.
And Ian Machado Garry is definitely that. He's got a lot of dynamic striking. I don't know how he's going to hold up in the grappling. I literally can't wait to break this fight down with you. What are your initial thoughts and who are you picking in this one?
I really love this fight. And if Ian Garry's fighting anybody else at 170, just given how he's been, fighting since he's been in the UFC, I'm likely going to pick Ian Garry to win the fight. But Shavkat's a little bit different. And this is really one of those high-level tests that the UFC is going to show us. And it's so fun to me that we get these types of fights early on. Like most of the time when you get 2 monsters like this, one of them's already been the champion and is on their way down. No, these 2 guys are the budding
Same
stars.
road, yep.
Same road. And there's been tons of freaks at 170 who looked like number 1 contenders to be future stars. But these 2 have stood the test of time. They've been undefeated, not only in their UFC career, but in their entire career. So this one's a great fight. And anybody that's saying Ian Garry doesn't have a chance is crazy. Now, the odds, I'm leaning towards the odds being not accurate, but they're a little bit close to accurate. It's like minus 400 for Shavkat and plus 300 for Ian Garry. So if you're an Irish guy and you have you think the luck is on your side, maybe put a little bit of coin behind Ian Garry because he has ways to win this fight. Maybe a better skill set to beat Shavkat than almost anybody at 170. And the reason for that is because they're kind of built similar. They have a similar body type, so they're very tall, very long, and Ian Garry is known for using long strikes. He was even effective at doing that against a guy like MVP. So if he can successfully outstrike a guy like MVP, he can successfully outstrike a guy like Rakhmonov. But the difference is this isn't a striking match, and Rakhmonov has proven to us that he's so good at mixing the martial arts. Whether it's striking into the clinch and then finding his knees and his devastating elbows, whether it's up against the cage or out in the wide open, or using those same sort of exchanges to tie up, get inside, and then look for his body locks or his trips or a way to get to the fight to the ground. Either way, he's totally equipped to go wherever this fight wants to go, and that's why I see the advantage going in his favor. And even though Ian Garry has looked damn near perfect, we have seen him look a little bit less durable, a little bit less perfect than Rakhmonov in his UFC fights.
Yeah.
Now, maybe he's fighting harder opponents, maybe it's stylistic differences. I don't know, but all I'm saying is Ian Garry, a couple of times in his UFC career, has turned his back and run to avoid something. We've never seen Shavkat do that. And, sometimes that is the only option you have. So you have to, concede and find some open space somewhere else. But Ian Garry, I think he's going to look really good early on, but this is a 5-round fight. And you can only be perfect on the outside for so long. Eventually, your opponent at a high level will start to pick up on reads. He'll find creative new ways to get inside and force you to fight a different fight than what you're doing. To fight the same style for 25 minutes is very, very difficult, especially when you're trying to do a rangy, long striking and heavy feint style. So I think Ian Garry's goal to our task of beating Shavkat is much more difficult than Shavkat's road to winning this fight. Shavkat, I think, could win this fight on the feet. I don't see it happening by knockout, but I could see him winning the fight on the feet, and I could see him winning the fight by submission. However, if I'm going to make my prediction, and I got to be completely honest, I'm going Shavkat Rakhmonov, but for the first time in his career, I think he's going to see the judges. I think the scorecards aren't going to get ripped up. I think Ian Garry is going to hang in there. The 4th and 5th round are going to be brutal for him. They're going to be some great experience rounds and some lessons learned. I've got Shavkat Rakhmonov winning this fight by decision, pretty unanimous, probably 4 rounds to 1 or 3 rounds to 2. But Ian Garry is going to be proven to the world that he's a legit tough guy, and he's going to be a thorn in the side for many welterweights for several years to come.
Yeah, all solid points. But here's the reality. Shavkat Rakhmonov isn't just an undefeated fighter.
Right.
He's never needed the judges in his entire mixed martial arts career. Who's stopping him? It's not going to be Ian Garry.
There you go.
Ian Garry is going to do better against Shavkat Rakhmonov than most people have done in the past.
Yep.
Your prediction of it actually going to decision, I don't think is an outrageous prediction. I do think Shavkat's ultimately going to find his submission victory. And the reality is this fight is going to come down to distance management for Ian. The only chance that he has here is to beat Shavkat at a long kickboxing range. That's the only place I really see where I think Ian is better than Shavkat. On the end of that long jab, using those high head kicks, good teeps and movement, really good movement. Shavkat can be a little bit methodical sometimes and just kind of walk you down.
Not great head movement.
Yeah, go back to the Jeff Neal fight. He took some big shots in that fight. That is also, by the way, another reason that I'm pretty comfortable in my prediction for Shavkat, because Shavkat ate some big shots from Jeff Neal, and he took them like a champ. So I think that Ian Garry is a better striker than Jeff Neal is, but I don't think he punches and cracks as hard as Hands of Steel does.
I agree.
So I think that the durability is not going to come into question. And then it's just you have 25 minutes for Shavkat to figure out the puzzle, close the distance, and once he gets inside, he's got great clinch work. He's got really good body locks. Look for some uppercuts, some elbows, some knees, stuff like that ultimately lead to his takedowns, which is where he has a massive advantage over Ian Machado Garry. Yep. And I only think it's a matter of time. I think Ian will get taken down and probably get back up a time or two, or maybe the round will end and he'll get to reset and start back on his feet. But 3-4 takedowns from Shavkat, and it's going to be a wrap for Ian Garry. I'm seeing a submission, probably head and arm triangle.
There you go.
Because I think he's just going to work that top pressure, ground and pound, weight, advanced position, head and arm triangle for the finish, and it's going to happen in the 4th round.
There we go. Yeah, the most taxing part of MMA is the grappling, and offensive grappling is very taxing on the body, but defensive is even worse. So, yeah, I think Ian Garry, if he gets taken down a couple of times, he might be able to get up, and then he might start looking for ways to stay safe until the rounds end. But, yeah, this is going to be a difficult night. And, look, if he beats Shavkat Rakhmonov, we're talking about a very, very different story with where Ian Garry's trajectory goes, not only as a potential future champion, but as a star, because love him or hate him, he's a polarizing figure. And, when there's stuff that people can make fun of you about, sometimes that winds up going in your favor and you get even more famous by it. So who knows what's going to happen. My money's on Shavkat. I think we're going to see the judges get involved. And the reason I say that is because there will be finishing opportunities for both men, more for Shavkat, and I think in this fight. But you do start to risk it when you look for the finish. And when there's so much on the line, when there's a title fight on the line, you really have to be calculated and make it look pretty next time. Get your hand raised. That's the final operation, or that's the final objective, of the fight. And I think that's what Shavkat's going to do.
Very nice. I cannot wait for this one.
Me either.
So the feature bout for UFC 310, this is going to be a rematch. Alexander Volkov versus Ciryl Gane.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be interesting. Volkov, since losing to Ciryl Gane, he won a fight and then he came back and lost to Tom Aspinall, but has been on a 4-fight win streak since then.
Yep.
And he's looked pretty impressive. He's looked like he's made some improvements to his game, and he's going to need them because the first fight with Ciryl Gane really wasn't all that close.
Right.
And that's why I think the odds have this at a -350 for Gane, and I think a +280 for Alexander Volkov. Gane was just too fast and too accurate. Volkov got caught standing, basically watching what his opponent was doing to him, and he was a half a step or a full step behind in almost every striking sequence. So it's going to be really interesting to see how he approaches this fight, because I doubt he plans to come in there and just be a human punching bag like he was the first time. So I think he's going to try to close the distance a little bit more effectively, not allow Gane to just sort of move in and out on his terms and strike on his terms. Gane is the faster fighter.
Yes.
And so Volkov is going to have to kind of get creative with how he is able to get his hands on Ciryl Gane, start to wear him out, start to use the clinch. You know, Volkov is very tall.
Yep.
He's very strong. He needs to make this a dirty fight that happens at close range, whereas Gane's probably going to try to rinse and repeat. Why? If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Right.
He did a great job picking apart Volkov the first time. He's going to look to do that again. So I think in some ways it's beneficial for Volkov, because he saw what happened to him and knows that he needed to change some things and then come back a different fighter. I think he kind of knows what Gane is going to bring to the table. I don't know that Gane really knows what Volkov is going to bring into this fight.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think this is a really fun fight. And when you have a rematch like this, a lot of times you might just assume it'll be a similar fight to the last time. But I think this one could be a little bit different because Volkov's an intelligent guy. Now he's really finding his groove. So I think he's made some good adjustments to his fighting style. You know, when you're a 6'7", 6'8" guy and you're 30-something years old, you're not going to change drastically what you do, but you're going to maybe amplify the attributes that you naturally have and figure out a game plan that works best for your body and your fight style. So I think Volkov has looked really good lately. He looked like a poised heavyweight that could contend potentially in a couple more fights if he's able to keep getting his hand raised. But Gane is a very fast fighter, like you said. For heavyweight, he's so fast. And it's not just like his striking speed, but his footwork is quick. And he's very good at getting inside, scoring his little shots, and then jumping right out before the big heavyweight that he's fighting gets their big punch off. So I do think that the speed is going to be a big difference in this fight like it was in the first one. I think if Gane's able to go out there and fight like he did last time, he's going to breeze to an easy victory. But Volkov knows how to fight on the outside. They spent 15 minutes in the cage together, and even though he lost, I'm sure he learned a lot in that fight. So I'm excited to see what he does differently, but I do think that Ciryl Gane really does have a great skill set to fight a guy like Volkov, because when you're fighting a Volkov, you don't have to worry so much about the takedown, which realistically turns the fight into a kickboxing match. And Volkov, in my opinion, is a great mixed martial artist striker, especially for the heavyweight division. Ciryl Gane is a very good kickboxing striker. He's a very good Muay Thai striker. And when you bring him into MMA, then everything starts to even itself out a little bit. But when you're talking about basically taking a lot of the clinch work, a lot of the cage work, and then all of the groundwork out of the equation, you're talking about a kickboxing match. And when you talk about a really high-level MMA guy going in there and fighting a really high-level kickboxing guy in a kickboxing match, it doesn't tend to go the MMA guy's way. Now, if he's able to utilize more wrinkles of the MMA game and make it a dirtier fight, make it a more well-rounded fight, then that increases his chances. But if he goes out there and tries to strike with Ciryl Gane, I think the same thing that happened the first time is going to happen again. Except this time it could be even worse because Ciryl Gane has the confidence and the ability to know that he can go out there and do a lot of damage on Volkov.
Yeah, if this was just a kickboxing match, obviously we saw what happened the first time around.
Right.
Is Ciryl Gane a better kickboxer than Alexander Volkov? The answer is obviously yes.
Yep.
But who's the better, or who's the more complete mixed martial arts fighter? I would make a real argument that Alexander Volkov is.
100%.
If you look at what happened when John Jones was able to get in on Ciryl Gane and take him down,
Yeah.
it was like almost as easy for John to submit Ciryl Gane as it would be for him to submit a local heavyweight that's on his third or fourth fight,
child's play,
making his way up the circuit. Volkov, I mean, obviously we can't compare because Volkov has never fought John Jones, but I think that his game is a little bit more complete than Cyryl's.
Yep.
And the last time when he lost to Gane, he allowed the fight to happen in the one dimension where Ciryl had a massive advantage.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to make that mistake again. I think he's going to look to make this fight ugly.
Yep.
I think he's going to try everything he can to prevent Ciryl from getting the range that he wants and
finding that
staying
rhythm
there. Yeah, in and out, because he's not as fast as Gane. And I think that he's going to be able to actually have some success with the changes he's made. You know, he's on a 4-fight win streak right now. Ciryl Gane, he fully lost to John Jones, and he came back and he beat Sergey Spivak. But then he's talking about being in movies and acting and stuff like that. And when you've got a guy who's got his nose to the grindstone and is on a 4-fight win streak, and another guy who's a little bit less active these days and talking about other things and talking about Hollywood, you know, and also that guy that you beat before has the blueprint of exactly what you did to beat him,
right?
And then saw exactly where your flaws are against John Jones,
right?
I think we're going to see a different Alexander Volkov. And I am actually going to predict that the underdog at a plus 280 wins this fight.
Wow.
I think he's going to be able to close distance effectively. I think he's going to be able to grapple when necessary. I don't think this is going to be a big grappling fight, but I think there'll be some exchanges that Volkov is going to win. And I think he's going to disrupt the timing and the range of Ciryl Gane in an effort to get his hand raised. It's going to be a unanimous decision, 29-28, Alexander Volkov.
There we go. 2 decisions, and then we might have to see him go one more third time for a rubber match. But no, I think that Volkov, he does have a better chance to win this fight if he goes out and uses a better game plan. But yeah, I just see Gane's speed being a real problem for him. And Gane starts really calculated. He starts really well. He's always accurate with his strikes. He doesn't throw a ton early on, but he throws enough, and it's all pretty high quality. Also, you have to think about Volkov's body. He's a long, tall guy with a big torso, and Gane's a little bit shorter, so he's going to have a closer proximity to the body to land his shots. So when he does do that, if I was Volkov's corner, I'd be looking for maybe things like knees up the middle when Gane does change levels and look for some strikes down the middle. It's not going to be that often because he's not a boxer that dips and dives too much, but Gane does change levels a little bit when he wants to attack the body. So Volkov's got to look to do some damage with some big shots early and slow Gane down, completely be disruptive with that long jab that he's got. And if he's able to do that, throw off all the rhythm of Gane, I think he does have a good chance of winning. But in my opinion, Gane's so good at winning rounds in a kickboxing range, and I see this fight primarily taking place in kickboxing range. That's why I'm going unanimous decision. Once again, Ciryl Gane gets his hand raised over Volkanovski. Volkanovski, no. Ciryl gets his hand raised over Volkov.
Nice prediction. He probably would also beat Volkanovski.
100%.